This is my Porsche 992 Carrera S, and the eagle-eyed of you will notice that it doesn't look like a Carrera S. It's got a GT3 bonnet and some further GT3 modifications. Now on the outside it looks pretty good, certainly to my eyes, but this was a prototype bonnet that was put on this car when I purchased it, and when you open it, it doesn't look quite as good, especially around the vents. You also notice that on a real GT3, the vents aren't actually glued into the bonnet. They're actually separate and down at the front plastic panel just around the front. This video is going to be about tidying these vents up. I'm going to be doing some 3D printing, going to be addressing some of the carbon issues on the bonnet, and I'm going to be using some 3D modeling tools such as Autodesk Fusion and 3D printing on a bamboo printer. So let's run through the tools. First up, I'm going to be using Polycam. I'm going to be using it on an iPhone. Then I'm going to be using Autodesk Fusion 360. I'm going to be using the free version, and then we're going to be 3D printing on Bamboo Lab. So let's start off with the 3D scanning on Polycam. So first up, Polycam. So I've downloaded this from the App Store on the iPhone, and we're going to be selecting Object Scan. So here you can just see me scanning around the rear of my bumper, and effectively it's quite simple to use. You just move the camera and it will take shots as it goes through it. Now I finished doing that. I'd already done the vents, and here you can see the model as it's kind of scanned into Polycam. Just zooming in there on a few bits, and you can see that it does an okay job, but it's not perfect. Then we're going to export it out of there, and here you see me using Fusion to import that mesh so we can start working on it. So I've done a transfer over to my Mac, import the mesh, comes over a couple of prompts, and here you can now see it. And there's a couple of bits you probably want to do. It's just sort of like center it and level it to the ground. And there you go. Your scan is now in Fusion for you to work on. So with our mesh imported, what we want to do now is take a measurement and make sure that the scale of our mesh matches the measurement of the actual vent. So you can see there I took a gauge scale measurement on the actual bonnet, and if you see the measurement there, you can just see it's just not correct. Effectively the scale isn't correct, so we need to address that before we start modeling. Otherwise we're going to end up with a problem where our model is obviously much smaller or too big and not fit the vent. So what we do is we scale and you select the model, and then we're going to select the level of scaling required. We want a uniform scale, so we don't want to scale on any single axis. We want to scale overall, and we're going to scale that up quite significantly. And zooming out, obviously the model doesn't look any different, but this does now mean that our mesh now matches the scale of our bonnet. And it's going to do another quick double check there, and as you can see now it does match, so we're bang on. Right, now we're actually going to get into the modeling itself. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to create a sketch. I'm selecting the axis that you want to create that sketch on, and we are going to be using a fit point spline, and I'm just going to be now just effectively placing those spline points around the vent, as you can see here, just getting it not absolutely super close, because we actually want this vent to fit inside, not ajar to it, so that it won't actually like fit into the vent space at all. So just mapping these out, and as you can see, even as I'm mapping them out now, some of them don't quite look in the correct position, but not to worry, we can fix that. What you don't really want to do here is go overkill with the amount of points that you apply, because especially on the straight edges you want those nice and straight, but when you get into the corners it actually creates the curves that you need anyway, so that's going to give us exactly the kind of curvature we want. So we've joined and closed up that spline. Now we just want to do some checks on just where some of these things are, and this is where you can really see some of the imperfections in the scan that we've got, but that's the way it is. We're not dealing here with like absolutely top end equipment, but it does give you a reasonably good start. And just selecting some of these points and getting them just a bit tighter. And we're actually going to delete a couple of these because we don't really need them. It actually is creating sort of an imperfection in the actual model itself. And you just see as I delete them, the lines just look a bit sharper instead of the tool trying to map some curves into the lines. So it's doing exactly what it should do, but with all those sort of extra spline points it doesn't work. So now we finish that sketch. So what we do is we're going to click on create and we're going to select extrude. And when we do this, we obviously want our sketch selected. And then you can choose how many faces. You'll see as I move on to the next section, I don't quite get this right, but this is where we tailor it effectively. So just getting it into shape there, and then effectively want to select the amount of extrusion that we actually want. So that's as you can see, the shape there is dragging out as we want, but it doesn't match at all the actual sketch. So what we're going to need to do there, just adjust the distance a little bit more. We're actually going to need to adjust the faces, and as we adjust those faces you're going to see it tighten up and get much closer to our original sketch, and we're going to add like quite a significant amount more faces to get that to tighten up. Still see a couple of little imperfections there on the side. Must admit I'm no master on this tool, and some of this I'm kind of learning as I go along. There's plenty of like fantastic tutorials out there, and I'm sure some of you watching this might be thinking, wow, there's other ways of doing it. I did actually try a couple of different ways. This one in the end is the one I felt like most comfortable with. So yeah, when I've selected that back to uniform, that's got us effectively where we need to be. Much better. Now it absolutely matches our spline points, and yeah, looks pretty good actually. Okay, so now the next thing we need to do is, as you can see, our extrusion is completely flat, but our vent is not. It's off at a slight angle. So let's just try and get this to at least mirror the angle of the vent a bit better. We at least want it to sit flush on the face, and then we'll use another little method. Again, there might be other ways of doing this, but using another method just to get this to kind of level out and fit correctly. So what I'll do is I'll actually cut the bottom off, but here we're just going to do a bit of finessing, just trying to get this to line up And now on this face, we're talking sort of quite minor movements. So we're selecting the move tool here. We're doing some rotation. As you can see, that moves in sort of quite big jumps. So we want to finesse this by very, very small margins. So yeah, the next couple of bits is just sort of finessing that to get it right, get it where it needs to be. So we haven't finished on our form yet. The next thing I want to do is just get that kind of nice little roll top. And so we're going to edit the curve. We selected that top edge. And with that top edge selected, we are going to effectively drag it up a bit more. So I'm holding down the Option key here on my Mac, and when you do that, as you pull up from that selected edge, it adds in an additional section, and now we can kind of finesse that bit as well. That's given us a little bit to play with, and from there, that again looks pretty aligned with the top. And now we're going to drag that out ever so slightly. And because we're working using a form, it will create that nice curve on the top as well. It blends it really nicely. So even with one of those sort of minor additional layers we put in there, you can see an ever so slight one. And then we're going to add another one again as well. And that gives us our lovely little lip there across the top. And that looks pretty good from a form perspective. I think that looks pretty good. You can see from the scan itself though that it is overlapping in certain areas, and that really is just an imperfection of the scan. I did no real preparation on the actual bonnet itself. It's not an extremely shiny surface, but you can use a spray or talcum powder, which I'll show on the screen now. If you use the spray, it effectively removes some of that gloss. It's a temporary surface, and it makes scanning that bit better. So that's worth a try here. But this was good enough just to get what we needed to model from. Couple of little bits of extra movement on that top lip. Yeah, and overall, think I'm pretty happy with that. So what we've got so far is now a shape that matches our vent, but it's just a shape. It's very thin. If we printed this, it would be wafer thin. You wouldn't be able to 3D print this at all. So what we need to do now is we're going to select Modify, and we're going to use the aptly named Thicken. And what that is going to do is allow us to basically say how sort of thick do we want this to now be. So we select the type of edge we want. We want a nice sort of smooth, soft edge. So we've gone for soft. And now we're actually going to select the thickness. And gone for 2mm there. And that should give us exactly what we need. So we click on OK, and we're done. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're actually going to create a plane, and we're going to use that plane to cut off the bottom of our original form that is mapped around the edge of the vent. And by doing that, we're going to cut that piece off and get it to then align onto the actual vent meshing, and that's going to give us our sort of perfect fit. So I've got that plane created, and now I'm just going to do some adjustments. So selecting that body, and we're going to move this now into place so we can match the actual shape of the scan. So just dragging it down there, and as you see, as I drag it down, you can actually see the mesh peeking through of the original mesh scan. And now it's all a case of just getting these angles absolutely correct, so that as we sort of see that mesh peeking through that plane that we've created, you can see that it all looks from a pattern perspective showing through perfectly across the whole piece. So as you can see there, as I'm adjusting it, it's slightly visible at the top but not visible at the bottom, so that means the angle's not quite right. So just adjusting the angle a tiny bit more, really kind of like fractions here, and we're going to move it down ever so slightly, and this should give us what we need. Yeah, that's looking pretty bang on now. Now we can see the mesh all the way through, nicely visible, not showing at one end and not the other. And that's now going to work for us. Okay, so we're going to finish with that form. Now we know that we've got that correct. And you can now see how, with both of them visible, it's going to slice through our vent shape that we've made. So we're going to use the split body function. We're going to select the body that we're going to split, and then the tool that we're going to use, which is that plane we created. Click on OK, and you can see over there on the left it is now created two separate models. And our top half of the model, that's the piece that we're going to be using. So if I hide these now, hide the original scan, that's it. Look, we've got our model there, and it's looking very nice. Now it's looking like something usable. Okay, so now we're going to 3D print. This is pretty straightforward, to be honest with you. So you just right click on the model, save to mesh, and then you can click print type. And so we're going to click print utility, and we're going to select bamboo. Now what that does is then creates a direct connection to our bamboo application, which you can see opening now. Let's just pause there for a second. Obviously this tutorial is tailored to using these applications. So assumption here is you've got Bamboo Studio already installed, your 3D printer set up, and you've also set up your account in a way that allows for your MacBook, your PC, equally your phone, to be able to connect and log in to your Bamboo printer. So in terms of the printer, I don't really change many of the options. As you can see here, we've got our model now onto the build plate, and I'm just going to be moving this around. I wanted it to sit in a certain way on the actual printer plate. You can use the tools to like rotate and align and get all the meshes on there together, but sometimes it flips some of those models, and it does mean that when it prints, you might be printing on the face that you don't want to print on. So I'm going to clone this model now I've got it in the right place. You can see I've got an error there that the cloned model doesn't quite fit on the plate properly, and once I've mirrored it, I'm going to start moving it and getting that into place. So I'm going to fast forward this bit. Okay, so with both of those models now sitting flush on the plate, we just need to do a couple of adjustments onto the settings just to get it right. So in terms of strength, I'm just going to add just an extra wall thickness there and a slightly higher infill. And then I'm going to add in the supports because of the lip. As it starts to print without any supports, the lip will just fold over and we'll end up with a mess. So that's it. We click slice the plate, and that's going to slice up the model and get that prepared so it can be 3D printed. That doesn't take very long, and it gives us an idea then of how long it's going to actually take to print this model. So not too long, not too long. So now we're going to click print plate, and this is where, as I mentioned before, we've got a direct connection to our printer. I'm going to be printing in PETG, and then we send it off to the printer and away it goes. Okay, let's get up to the shed where the 3D printer is, and we'll see that file coming through. Okay, so I'm going to be using some of this 3D lac spray. It's pretty good, nice and easy. You just spray it onto the build plate, and that's going to give the 3D print some adhesion so it doesn't separate from the plate as it starts to print. Yeah, nice and shiny. Let's get it on there. And now the printer's just going through its preparation cycle. And I've set on the alignment and calibration features. I kind of do this every time. Might be a little bit overkill, but it means there's much less time of failure. So off it goes, and there you can see the model coming through. Time for a dog walk while the 3D print goes ahead. Okay, and we're back, and it's looking pretty good. Yeah, you can see how the supports there are printing, and although they're not actually touching anything at the moment, they will do as the lip starts to curve over the top. But yep, it looks like the 3D print is going well, and we're 87% complete. You can see that lip now really starting to come over, and it's yeah, looking very good. Okay, so the print's finished. Here it is on the plate, and because of that spray we've put on, hopefully this is not going to be too difficult to pull off. So just pulling the plate away slightly. Yeah, comes off nice and easy. Yeah, that's a nice print. Looks pretty good. Only a few bits of tidying up that we need to do. So I've got some small snips here, and I just use those to cut off those little tree structures, and I work my way around both of these, getting them all cleaned up. And here we go with the sander. I bought this on Amazon actually, really good. It's not for sanding 3D prints, it's actually for sanding feet. So yeah, if you got rough skin, you probably would have seen one of these before, maybe even use it. But this one works really well actually. It's got a little sort of speed adjustment. And I found this absolutely perfect. Just do this sort of up. It's going to be work. Okay, so we've done that bit of tidying up now. We've got both of our models printed, and there's a couple of little imperfections there, as you can see around the edge, and you often get this. I mean, you can sort of tidy some of this up with ironing, but the reality is that a 3D printer is printing in layers, and you're going to see those layer lines. So I'm going to do a bit more sanding now and try and blend those in a bit more. So yeah, let's go on with some sanding. So sanding is now done, and I'm going to be using this spray putty. I found this works really well. Let's give it a good shake. As you spray this on, what it does is it actually creates quite a thick layer, but it fills in those layer lines that we get from the 3D print. Not going to go too over the top, otherwise it takes a while to dry and then you start getting runs. But that's our first coat done, and I'm going to use my mini heat gun now just to sort of dry that off a little bit, pushing it away so it doesn't start to adhere to that paper underneath and we're not ripping some of the putty off. That'd be a bit of a disaster. Right, as you can see there, that's not too bad for a first coat, but clearly it's definitely going to need a couple of coats. So I've given that a couple of coats, and now I'm going to put on some plastic primer. Again, not going too heavy with it, otherwise we're just going to get some runs. I mean, still going to need a bit of sand afterwards, but give that a nice coat. And whilst we let that primer dry, time for another dog walk. Come Alana, let's go. With the primer now dried, we're going to start putting on our matte black spray. And this is when it's going to start now looking like the completed item. So give that a nice coat. Again, I'm going to dry it for a few times. And after a couple of coats, they are looking pretty good. So here's both of them now finished. And I'm really happy with the result here. They look really good. Now we're going to move on to getting it on the car. But before we do that, I want to tidy up some of this terrible finish. And if some of you are a bit squeamish about me using a sharp knife here on some of this sealant right next to this carbon, you might want to close your eyes or fast forward the next bit. But I've done a few bits of work on carbon before. I'm quite happy with what I'm doing. And so the scrape off, it's almost like a bit of a calcium kind of deposit in some of these sections. And although some of it won't actually be visible, there are some scratches and imperfections on the carbon itself that I really wanted to resolve. I didn't want to get the vents in, and it still kind of looks untidy with other marks on the bonnet. So let's scrape some of this off and just get some of the worst bits off before we get onto some sanding. Okay, a test fit with the final printed models, and yes, I'm really happy with that fit. Yeah, it fits in nice and snug. Once it's sealed in, I think it's going to look very good. So, with that test fit done, I'm just going to sand off now, spray a bit of water on, and I can work through a few different sanding pads here. I'm not showing you the entire process, but effectively I've gone from like a 380 grit pad all the way up to a 2000 and a 3000 to get that all smoothed off. And yeah, all of those imperfections are largely gone now. All that I'm really left with is a couple, in fact 3 deeper scratches which have gone through the resin, and so we're going to address those scratches now. I've got some XER epoxy resin. I bought this from Easy Composites and I've used it before on some of the carbon work I've done. We're going to get that mixed up. I'll put a little picture now. It shows you the actual XER resin coating and the hardener that you need to use, and the levels of mixture. But I'm going for such a small amount here. It's just such a tiny area to fill in. I've already taped up the area. I'm trying to make these areas as small as possible, so I've taped it up with just little slots there that are lined to the scratches, and let's just sort of tap that in. I don't want the resin thick because that's just going to mean more and more sanding afterwards, so I'm just making sure that it gets into those scratches, and then I'm going to brush off the excess. So we've got 3 different spots here that we need to get that resin into. Yeah, just tapping it in nicely there. And now get off that excess resin. So just brush it over on all 3 of those areas. Make sure it's in and make sure there's not too much on top. Now, just in the way we cleaned up the original carbon, I'm going to work my way up through the sanding pads. I'm on a 320 here, and I'm going to work my way up all the way into the 2000s and then 3000s and get that nice and smooth. And because it's a matte on it, I'm not going to worry about a gloss finish. So with the tape off, I'm going to carry on working with 2000 and 3000 grit. Some foam here. I did think about applying some more sealant, but I really just didn't want to put some more sealant in here and end up with just a bit more of an eyesore. So I'm laying this foam in here. That's going to cover up the sealant and just give a slightly better finish and look, and I'm going to apply this onto both vents. And with that foaming completed, now I'm going to start laying in the sealant. Don't want to go too crazy on here. I don't want to move from one problem to another. So taking my time here and being careful, especially as that bonnet is up in the air and gravity is going to want that sealant to drip down. sealant now in, now's its time to be careful here, but get this vent in. Bit of a tricky moment here, especially as it's gravity doing its work trying to put it back down. But yeah, the vent is in, and now I'm going to apply some masking tape just to get it to hold in and be as close as possible. It's not going to be absolutely perfect fit, so I was always expecting just to have to run an additional bit of sealant around the edge once this has all gone in. So let's tape these in, and once they're taped in on both sides, it's a case of leaving them to dry overnight again. And that's it, sealant dried. I put a little bit of an edge around it as well, cleaned it up, and yeah, I'm really happy with that. Okay, it's not specialist level perfect, but 100% better than it was before. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed watching that, and more videos to come.